Hey everybody, it's my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank, and I've just been standing here enjoying watching this long-finned skirt tetra show everybody in the tank who's boss. You can clearly see he's the most dominant one, the largest one, the most elaborate fins, and he's making sure everybody in the tank knows it. It's kind of been cracking me up. The point is we're getting ready to take a little trip around the world here. We're going to start at the 29 miscellaneous as usual, and we're going to go around. We're going to have a look at all my tanks here in the fish room. So in addition to enjoying the black skirt tetras in there, the long fin skirt tetras, I also have been enjoying my angelfish that's in there by itself now. I did have another one in there with it, but they fought a lot, and this one got harassed and bullied. And now we get to see it out and about a lot more, and I'm really happy about that because it's a really pretty angelfish. It's not really flashy, but structurally I think it's really interesting looking. I like the shape of the fins, and it really does have a lot of really pretty blues and purple colors in there when it gets up under the light. So really pretty angelfish, and I'm glad we get to see more of it now. The other thing we've done to this tank this week is a simple water change. I did a filter change, and when I was in there I noticed that the biofilters were getting a little gunked up, and I cleaned them out a little bit to allow the water to flow a little more freely. That was just a few days ago, and if you'll look, you can already see how we're getting water flowing back through the center, which means it's time to get in there and change those filters again. The other thing, if you had not noticed, is the flower spike we've got on the Anubias. I think this is the first flower I've actually gotten since I put this chunk of Anubias in this tank. It didn't do too well at first, and I was wondering whether or not it was really going to take and grow, and it has. It has not disappointed me at all. It looks fantastic in there. I do have a clown pleco. He was down here on the bottom somewhere a few minutes ago. I don't know if it's still down there. Oh, there it is, right there. So that clown pleco right there on that white rock, if you can see that, is responsible for keeping just about everything in this tank as clean as it is. I did not even get in and wipe the glass down when I did my water change. It was a simple water change and filter change, and the tank just looks like that all by itself. So you can thank that little clown pleco in there for doing all the hard work of keeping this tank nice and clean. And I do put algae wafers in the tank too, so good for that fish. Anyway, moving right along, we got a lot to cover tonight. My 55-gallon Gourami tank is doing well enough. I just did a water change last night. I checked the nitrates before the water change just to get an idea of what was going on in the tank. And they were sitting up around the red. You know, it was getting into the red. That's pretty normal for my tanks. But it wasn't really red like I was expecting it to be. It was almost, if I wanted to be generous, I would say it was in the upper orangey kind of color. And this was before the water change. So I'm confident now. I didn't bother to do a test afterwards. I'm actually running low on some of my test juices in there, so I didn't bother to do a test afterwards. If it was that low before, then I can only imagine that we're down safely into the orange. And I say safely not because I think that being into the red is dangerous, but I say safely just as I don't have to question whether it's red or orange. It's definitively probably down into that orange color now on the API test kit. So other than that, not a lot going on in this tank. I did do some work in here recently trying to combat some of this scummy growth and whatnot, but it didn't touch it, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. I think it's some sort of algae. It doesn't feel like the cyanobacteria. It doesn't peel off in sheets the way the cyanobacteria does. I've actually tried to scrub some of that out of there, and it's really growing on all of the plants and everything, so I think that is algae. I think the plants, the algae-eating fish in there are keeping it cropped fairly short. Like, for example, you can see on that tiger lotus leaf, you can see that bright green. That is hair algae and would be really long and stringy if there were not fish in there that were nibbling on it. And so that's why it looks all cropped short like that. It's being nibbled down and kept in check. So I think that's also why all this other stuff looks like that. I do think that it's being nibbled on and kept in check. but something needs to be done. It's just really getting nasty looking in here, and I'm not sure why I've had this sudden explosion of all this weird growth. You can see it's all over the glass and everywhere, and I've been in this tank a lot scrubbing it out. So probably pretty soon we're going to be getting in here and doing some sort of manual removal, just, you know, some scrubbing it out and removing some stuff. I may even pull large chunks, if not all of that Java out of there, and just start with some fresh Java. I've got plenty of it in the other room. I will also throw out there that I've always got Java and Water Sprite for sale. You can check my email in the description down below if you're interested in any aquatic plants. I won't ship you anything that looks like this or is covered in any kind of growth like that, but I am thinking about pulling this out of here and then grabbing some of my Java out of the other room and either throwing this in a bucket and treating it separately and seeing what I can do with it, or just chucking it and calling it good and just growing some fresh new Java. But that is several years worth of growth in there, so I really don't want to just pull it out and throw it away. Not really sure what I'm going to do about that, but that's what we got going on in the Gourami tank this week. My Tbar tank here, not a lot going on that I can think about right now off the top of my head. I did do a water change yesterday, but that was it. Oh, I have my filter, my heater. I don't know why I'm saying I can't think about anything going on in this tank. I had a my other original glass heater in this tank went up. I don't know what was wrong with it, but on more than one occasion I came down and the tank temperature was well up into the 80s. So that heater was intermittently heating my tank up very warm. I removed it. I put a digital heater in there that had a swanky, you could tell the temperature, you know, it had the digital gauge on it, and I could control the temperature from the outside of the tank and everything. And it had some sort of error code going on. A sensor wasn't working, so that never really heated my tank or did anything. It never warmed the tank up. The tank just pretty much dropped to room temperature once I put it in there. So now I've got it out of there. This is just a little 50-watt heater that I had in the other room. It was brand new. I'd ordered it for something else. I never got around to using it. And so I've just thrown that in there. I'm probably working the thing to death, trying to keep a 55-gallon tank hot. You know, a 50-watt heater is not very much to try to heat 55 gallons. It should be probably a 200-watt heater. So that's kind of doing its thing. I did stick my finger in the tank a little while ago, and it's plenty comfortable temperature. If I had to guess, I'd say it's right where I want it, about 77 degrees. I don't have my thermometer down here at the moment, so I'm not going to check for certain, but you know, it's fine. I stuck my finger in there, and I guarantee it's well within the parameters that I'm looking for. So I'm not unhappy about that. It's just how much work is that little heater in there doing to keep it that warm. So I did order a new one of the digital heaters. I simply replaced the damaged one. I thought about it a little bit, and I decided, you know what? I'll give everybody a free pass. You know, anybody can have a defective product or something like that. It doesn't mean I'm going to write off those heaters. I've bought some really high quality stuff in the past where the first one I bought turned out to be defective, and once I got that sorted out, I turned out to be very happy with the replacement product because it was a simple defect. And again, anybody can have a defective product from time to time. So I did decide to simply replace that tank heater because I do want to try it. I do want to see how well it works, and I never got the chance. I never got to see how efficiently it heated the tank. I never got to see that temperature gauge fluctuate. I set it to 25 and it just sat there. It never did anything. The number I was looking at was not a temperature reading on the tank. It was the setting I had set it to, and then it simply sat there. It never engaged and began heating the tank. It just sat at my 25-degree setting. So in a few days I'll have that back. We'll have a new heater in the tank, and we'll see how that works out. So, you know, make sure you're subscribed and all that good stuff. You won't miss any of that coming up. So moving along, because we do still have a lot to cover, and it's already 10 minutes into this video. I'm not sure what's going on with my plants in here, but I did just notice the other day that everything over here looks like it's being just shredded up. So either I've got a huge outbreak of snails that I can't see, or my rubber lips in there have decided that they're going to start eating plants, which I've never had an issue with rubber lips eating plants before. I'm not sure what's going on. It looks like everything over here, all the leaves and everything have been skeletonized. So there's that. I really don't know what to make of that. I just kind of noticed it yesterday, and I haven't really had time to investigate or think much about it or anything else. But otherwise, the tank is looking pretty good. It's getting a little overgrown. I do want to get in here, even though that temple plant we were just looking at is so beat up down below. The top portion of it actually looks pretty good. I've got a lot of nodes up here, and I've got a lot of root development on the stem. So if I cut that and pull it out, I can probably transplant that somewhere, since it's already emergent, and I can probably get it to grow emergent like that. So possibly the waterfall tank, possibly my open top tank in my office upstairs, or possibly just planting it in another tank somewhere and having some more temple plant grow. But I do want to get in there and take care of that. And here, if we look right on that frond, you can see one of my rubber lips in there scraping and scouring away. So maybe they're just in there a little too vigorous. Maybe they're not necessarily eating the plants, but as they scrape and scour, their teeth are damaging the plants. I suppose that's a possibility. These off-walks grazers do have sort of bristle-like teeth, and that's how they graze, and that's how they clean everything. They scrape it clean with their brush-like teeth. So imagine if you were brushing the algae off of a soft leaf with a wire brush. You know, you can do some damage to the leaf while you're doing that, and I suspect that's possibly what we're witnessing going on there. So maybe I need to step up how much algae wafers I put in this tank, so that the rubber lips don't have to rely so much on the natural algae that's growing in the tank. Of course, the downshot of that is that I get more algal growth going on in the tank. Do you want to notice the beautiful Anubias there that is taken off for some reason and doing really well? And this little tiny Anubias back here, that is the same species. I don't know what ever happened with this Anubias, but it's sort of dwarfed in this tank. It's never really grown full size, but that has been in here for probably close to 6 years now. That's as old as the tank. That got put in when I put the tank together, and it still just sort of looks like that. I've got another bit of it. I don't know if it's still alive, but it's growing. If you can see this little patch of Anubias right there growing on that branch, that is the same story. Went in the tank 6 years ago when I set the tank up, and that's what it still looks like. It tiny little leaves on it. It's dwarfed. I don't know how it stayed so small or how it developed so small, but both of those Anubias in there sort of became sort of natural bonsais, maybe. They dwarfed themselves somehow. I don't know. But it's pretty cool, and they're still doing really well and nice and bright green, so I'm really happy about that. Otherwise, nothing really going on. I know my black ghost knife fish is still in here. I did see its tail wiggling around the other night when I turned the lights out, and you know, that's about as good as it gets. But it is still alive and presumably doing well enough, because I haven't seen anything to indicate otherwise. So, moving on to my 125-gallon native tank. Can't really think of much going on in here either. I did catch a new fish not long ago and put it in here. I thought maybe it was a creek chub, but it didn't quite look like a creek chub. Someone else suggested that possibly it was some sort of minnow. I can't remember the name of that they gave it, but I looked it up, and it could have been a bullnose minnow, maybe a blunt-nosed minnow. I think it was blunt-nosed minnow. And I looked it up, and it could have been that, but it didn't matter because the next day it was gone. And I think my big old creek chub right there that everybody calls chubs, so I just think of as chubs now, probably ate it. This thing's a brute. It eats anything. It bites my finger when I stick my finger in the tank. Of course, some of the other ones do too. I've got quite a few of the creek chubs in here that are fairly large. So other than that, not a lot going on in here either. I haven't seen hide nor hair of the crayfish in quite a while, so I don't know if it's still alive and doing well, or if it just stays hidden all the time, or what. But I don't think it's in there anymore. I haven't seen any bits and pieces, but I've also not seen any trace of that crayfish. I was going to say now speak of the devil, I thought I saw its claw tips sticking out, but it was just a little piece of the way the gravel was sticking out. I thought it was the tips of the claws, but it was not. So as I said, I just have not seen that crayfish in there for a long time, so I don't necessarily think it's in there anymore. Did a water change, and I did have to replace one of the bulbs. I don't know if you can tell the difference in color temperature. There shouldn't be any difference in color temperature, but it does look a little different to me. So they might not be the same exact color temperature. They are different brands, but they are supposed to basically be the same LED spotlights. These are not the floodlights. These are the 25-degree angle beams, and if you were to look at it, it really just come down in a beam here, and it comes down in another beam right there. But other than that, water change, new light, and nothing else that I can think about. So we're going to move on. My snail tank needs a water change, or at least it needs to have some water added to it. I never really do water changes on this tank. I just add water to it. But it's still ticking over. I got baby snails everywhere, and of course I've still got the 2 ghost shrimp that are swimming around in the tank. I guess they help keep the population in check to some degree. You can see how deep that mulm is on the bottom. That's all basically just snail poop. So that gives you an idea of when the last time I did a water change on this tank was. It's been months and months and months and months since I've done a water change on this. I just top it off when the water gets low, and I almost can't even say that because the water is about 2 inches low right now, and I still have not gotten around to adding any new water to that. But it's a snail tank, so as long as they've got water, I don't care. They'll be fine. So my purple spotted gudgeon tank, I need to get in here and do some work too. I really want to do something about the lights, but I don't, we'll worry about that when I can afford to actually do something about the lights. It's, as I've mentioned before, it's just these cheap little strip lights. Say it's not a proper connection, but if you jiggle them around and you push on the connection, it'll light them up a little better. It's junk. I really need to get some real lights on this tank, but again, that's just something that's not a priority for me right now. And everything in this tank actually prefers low light, and that includes the plants that are in here. But I still do want to get in here and do some work. If you can see the brown and then that green slime, that green back there looks more like the cyanobacteria. If I got in there, I would imagine if I peeled on that, it would come off like in big sheets and it would feel slimy in my fingers. So that's what that cyanobacteria looks like. And then of course all that brown stuff to me just looks like brown diatom algae, and that will come out very easily. You can see how it's kind of already flaking off of some of the plants over here. The rubber lip pleco I have in here will scrape and scour that away. I don't think they eat it so much as they do just sort of brush it away as they're eating the other stuff that grows with it. So not too much work to get this tank cleaned up, but I really do need to get in here and do some work. If there is a tank in here that's probably genuinely slightly on the neglected side, it would be this one. I don't really honestly remember the last time I did a water change or filter change on it. Let's have a look. Yeah, so you can tell the water's coming through the center section in the filter, so that means the filter definitely needs to be changed. And again, even with the hang on the back filter, I don't even remember the last time I've changed the filter on this tank. So time to do some work on this tank. Again, I'll say make sure you're subscribed, and then that way when I do get around to doing some work on this tank and I shoot some video of it, you'll get to see it. I really wish my gudgeon would come out in the light a little bit, or this light would actually light up a little bit brighter and we'd get a little bit better look at him. It's a cool fish, not real active, boring kind of fish, but it's a really, really pretty fish, and it's really interesting looking fish. And I suppose their behavior is interesting for a while. It's definitely different once you get used to it. You realize that it just sits around doing a whole lot of nothing all day, and again, it just becomes a little bit on the boring side. So moving on to my 125-gallon tank. I gotta walk over here now. We can't really stand in front of the tank anymore. Make sure I'm not tripping over everything. As I said, this was a very impromptu sort of video. So there's the whole tank in one look. I did do a big water change on this tank yesterday. I got in there and wiped all the glass down. I did a little bit of work with hydrogen peroxide. I sprayed a little bit of hydrogen peroxide around in there just to clean off the surfaces once they were exposed above the water line. As I did maybe a 40% water change, I reduced the water level quite a bit, and while I had some of the plants and glass surfaces and stuff, I spritzed it down with the hydrogen peroxide. I saw something on the glass right there. I thought that was a snail. That's actually a flying insect that has come from the Waterfall Tank and is on the outside of the glass, not, as I suspected, a snail on the inside of the glass. So I pulled a bunch of water sprite out of here. Again, I will say, check my email in the description below. I've got lots and lots of water sprite for sale. I also went in and removed a lot of the Java Fern Windelov. And I apparently still have some air bubbles trapped in the filter, or else I didn't fill the tank up high enough, and this surface skimmer tends to suck air in if the water level gets a little bit low, even just like a little bit low, and it starts sucking air in, and I get these obnoxious bubbles in the tank, and then they start forming all over everything, and it gives that false purling effect, even though it's just not. It's just the bubbles getting stuck on stuff. So, got to do something about that. That annoys me. I hate bubbles in a fish tank. That's just one of my annoyances. This tank also seems to have had an explosion recently of this hair algae. You can see it looks like green fuzz all over everything. But something must be in there eating it, because it's not growing out of control. It's staying a green fuzz. And speaking of the devil, that's one of my chocolate zebra plecos on the back glass there. I've got 3 of those in this tank. So it's entirely possible that they're in there helping keep this clean. And then, of course, my Synodontis here is a good plant eater. So don't know maybe if that's going around munching on the algae when I'm not paying attention. I've never really seen it eating the algae, but I know it tears up the algae wafers when I put them in the tank, or any other kind of, you know, vegetable material I put in the tank. And I know Synodontis are known for being, you know, they might possibly damage some plants in your tank, depending on what those plants are. Most of what I have in here is a fairly hardy type plants. They're a little tough to chew. You know, Java isn't necessarily a plant that a lot of animals eat. But I bet if I had some nice tender plants in here, like some Combamba or something like that, I bet that Synodontis would tear it up. So it's entirely possible that that cyno is actually helping me keep my algae under control. I don't know. Anyway, that's all we've got going on in there. I will show you, I'm treating the plants that I pulled out of this tank. I don't know if they really had anything growing on them or not, but I did put them in a bucket with some ChemiClean, and I'm blacking them out for a couple days while they're being treated with the ChemiClean. So that should get them ready for going into my grow out tank in the other room, and then they will, of course, be available for sale, as I keep saying. So my 20-gallon Angelfish tank, haven't done anything new with this tank, but I have been thinking more about this tank. If you'll notice this lyre tail, I want to say that's a molly. It might be a platy, but I think that's a molly. It's really skittish, and where this tank's positioned, every time I walk in the room, it freaks this fish out. And I never get to see it, or seldom get to see it. I'm actually surprised it's out as bold as it is right now. As I squatted down, that scared it and ran it right back into the back corner of the tank. But it normally just hides in the plants or hides down at the bottom in a cave, and it only comes out when it thinks it's going to be fed. And so I think I may get in there and catch that and put it in my Waterfall tank, where it would have a nice larger tank with more places to hide, and it would be in a position to not be spooked by me every time I walked in the room. It's a very skittish fish, so again, I'm not sure what's going on with that. I've never seen a live bear that's acted so skittish before, but I have been thinking about doing something with that. Otherwise, this tank has been cloudy recently, and it is finally starting to clear up. Not really sure what happened, not really sure why it got cloudy on me, but it definitely clouded up, and I think we're coming down the backside of the cloudiness. And fortunately, we're getting a nice look at my angelfish here. At first glance, this one just looks like a standard sort of wild type angelfish, but when you see it up close and the lighting is just right, you'll realize it's got a lot of what appear to be like a pearl scale type shimmer to it. It's a really pretty angelfish, and I'm really happy that the water's clearing up and we actually get to see some of that color and some of that sparkle off of it, so quite happy with that. My quarantine tank is still just sitting there doing its thing. It's got a couple of guppies that I always just keep some fish in it just so it stays to be a, you know, an active living tank. And then of course I think my coolie loaches are still in there. I haven't seen them in a couple days, but I did see them, you know, a few days ago. They were still in there, both of them. So I am also thinking about collecting those up if I can catch them. One of the problems with this tank is it's sitting under the shelf, and getting in there, I mean, even just to feed this tank is a little on the difficult side. So getting a net in there to catch anything is really kind of a pain in the butt. So the difficult to catch fish are really a pain in the butt. You know, it's bad enough trying to catch the guppies out of there, trying to catch fish that really don't want to be caught and bury themselves and hide, make it even harder. But I have been thinking about getting them out of there and putting them in my office tank because the snails are getting out of control, and I think the coolie loaches would help keep the snail population under control. In fact, they'd probably eliminate the snail population in my office tank. So that is an option. So I'm going to say last, but certainly not least, is Butterbean's tank. And while I'm looking at it right there, if you look on that rock right where it sort of meets the vegetation, you'll see that tiny, tiny little yellow and black speck. That is one of my bumblebee gobies that is in this tank. I had someone asking me about them the other day. They said they hadn't seen them in a while and weren't so sure they were in here anymore, despite the fact that I reassured them that they are. So there's one of them, and I don't see the other one, but I do have two of them, and they are the tiniest little bumblebee gobies that I've ever seen before. But they are still in the tank, and they're still doing okay. Butterbean, of course, is down here in his cave. He's not being fed, so he's being skittish and shy as usual. I'm not really sure what's going on with him. It's still kind of the same old story with those white spots. Some days it looks like they're definitely expanding and he's getting more of them, and then other days it doesn't seem like it's so bad. I really still don't have any clue as to what they are. It's definitely not ick. I have a lot of people ask me if it's possibly ick. It's definitely not ick. Ick cannot live in water this salty. And I almost want to say that marine ick, which is not actually ick, it's marine white spot disease. It's something completely different than ick. But I want to say that that can't live in water this fresh. Remember, this is a brackish tank, and it's low-end brackish. It's well above the salt threshold for ick. You know, the freshwater actual true ick disease parasite. But I don't think it's salty enough for the marine disease that is often called marine ick or marine white spot. So either way, I'm ruling ick or even marine white spot out of the equation. I don't think that's it at all. And I just don't know what it is. It doesn't appear in any way to be a fungal infection. I don't think anything's biting or chewing on him. I really just don't know what it is. So, doesn't seem to bother him, and he, you know, his color stays good. He stays nice and bright and white in the belly. He eats well. He behaves normally. So, I'm not too worried about it. I just kind of wish I knew what it was. So, other than that, not a lot to talk about in this tank either. Again, did a water change this week. I wiped the glass down. I vacked out some of the old snail shells and stuff like that, and just got the tank sort of cleaned up in general and looking a little bit better. So there you are, a little less than half an hour. We made it all the way around the world. I will take a couple of minutes here and finalize. Get your eyes ready. And we'll have one last look at my waterfall tank here. Boy, it hurts my eyes a lot more than it's hurting yours, I'm sure. So, I know I keep saying I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about the other thing when it comes to this tank. And I really could talk about this tank all day because it's just awesome and I love it and I'm really happy with it. And that includes what's been going on with my red-clawed crab tank, because I've been seeing the red-clawed crabs out and about a little bit. We've got flowers starting to bloom. I've got bulbs starting to come up. The growth is really starting to come in. Fish population in my tank is starting to grow in a little bit. In fact, we've got one of my sculpins sitting right there. I'm going to try to keep myself out of the glare of the light and try to zoom in a little bit here. If you look right there on that log, you can see one of those mottled sculpins. Really, really cool fish. I just love those things. So I will be talking more about this. I will be shooting more video about it. At some point I will be talking about how I built it, you know, things I would do differently. I know I'm going to do that video at some point. If you've watched this far into the video and you're still listening to me ramble on, I will say that it's the middle of winter. I'm just really struggling with even getting down here and shooting any kind of videos at this point. I just got a whole lot of not motivation going on. I'm just kind of waiting for springtime, waiting to feel better, you know, get out and about and feel active again, and then I'll probably be cranking the videos out a lot more rapidly and stuff like that. I go through this every winter. My regular viewers that have been around for a long time know that I tend to fade out in the winter time, and then I'll pick back up in the spring when the weather gets nice again. So bear with me, and we will get to doing lots more videos like this. If you're interested in more behind the scenes kind of stuff or little chatty type videos with me talking about my waterfall tank here that I'm so in love with, then you can check out my Patreon page. And I do a lot more of this kind of stuff over there, where I tend to just sort of talk about whatever it is that's on my mind rather than whatever you know, video topic that we've got going on. So make sure you check out my Patreon page if you're interested in that. So I'm going to leave you with this tank and say thanks again for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, that way you won't miss anything. And then don't forget, of course, this one here is my waterfall tank. So thanks again. Hope you're still with me. See you on the next one.